The Pro Wrestling Vault. 35 short stories including Harley Race, Ricky Morton, Tracy Smothers, and Tim Storm. Along with 300 photos from the independent scene, taken from Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Get your book today by going to WrestleVille.com or LanceByChance.com. WrestleVille, it's where wrestling lives.
Hey everybody, this is Rick Del Santo and you are listening to the NWA Spotlight, and I am here joined today by NWA legend Micky Byggs. How's it going?
Legend. You got that right. You definitely got that right. The legend Micky Byggs. How's everybody doing out there in PZ or PW or whatever you want to call it? I know that you brought me on because you had to boost your ratings up, so I'm okay with that.
Oh, jeez. So I just want to know a little something about your career. I know you've been around quite a bit over the last, what I'd have to say, 20 plus years. Why don't you tell me about how you got involved in or interested in the world of professional wrestling?
Actually, it's 30 years. Thank you.
30.
Yeah, February 22nd was my 30-year anniversary. And well, how did I get involved? Well, like any other person out there that had the dream of being a pro wrestler, I started off as a fan. My earliest memories go back to when I was 4 or 5 years old. Even before that, my mother used to tell me the stories about how I'd watch then it was WWF, get the F out, if you will, and watched Chief Jay Strongbow, and I used to run around my living room jumping off furniture and doing the tomahawk chop, acting like I was Chief Jay Strongbow. So
Wait.
What's that?
So how far back would you say that you discovered it? I mean, you're not that much older than me from what I remember. I think you're about a year older than me. So
I'm 48. So
yeah.
Well, I'll be 48. Let's put it that way this year. So say 3 years old, 4 years old. So about 44 years ago.
Okay. All right. I'm just saying that I discovered wrestling probably, I don't know, 1984, if you will, with I guess with the boom of professional wrestling. So I know some people discovered it a little earlier than me. Tell me about how you got, I guess, involved in the world of professional wrestling. I know you were trained by the legendary Ox Baker.
Yep, that is correct. So I'd been searching. I wanted to, become a pro wrestler. That was my dream. That my heart was set into becoming a professional wrestler. And I was on the search for a trainer. And I checked all the area schools, at that time. And one of the ones that really, really sparked my interest was Walter Killer Kowalski. And I was in the process of, working out, trying to get all the details to go to see Kowalski and train with him. And financially at that time, it just wasn't going to work with all the travel. And because I live in Connecticut, it just wasn't going to work. So I kind of let that dream lay dormant a little bit. And one day I came across this little newsletter called Connecticut Pro Wrestling. And it was a little newsletter that was put out of the New London County area. And its editor and chief writer was a guy by the name of Brian Smith. And I became one of his biggest fans, so to speak. And him and I would go back and forth talking. And of course, this was before text messaging and all that good stuff. So we go back and forth talking and corresponding. And one day, he knew about my dream to want to become a wrestler. And one day I'm in my hometown at that time. It was Colchester. And for those of you who don't know where Colchester, Connecticut is, it's about 20 minutes outside of Hartford. And there was an event going on at the Colchester Town Green, and I was hanging out up there. I was a senior in high school, and it was probably around October, November time of 1991. And he had gone to my house looking for me. They told him where I was. Well, he came up there and tracked me down. And he found me. He's like, hey, he's like, I got some information for you. He says, I just did an interview with Ox Baker and I was telling him about you and he's interested in possibly training you. Give him a call. So I did. And Ox Baker and I met. We met at the YMCA in Willimantic, Connecticut. And we talked for a little bit and he told me his expectations. I told him mine. And from there, I kind of let the dream lay dormant again for just a little bit longer. And then February 22nd, 1992, I started training. And then about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. I don't remember the exact time frame. Before I graduated high school, I had my very first pro match.
Tell us
I
about
was,
about your first pro match. Where was that, and what was it
it,
for?
it was in Massachusetts. It was for a company called New England Pro Wrestling.
Okay.
The promoter at that time was Big City Mike. And $15 payday and a hot dog with a handshake.
That's funny. That's funny. Now I know that you had multiple gimmicks over the years. Uh, Mickey Byggs being one, and I'm trying to remember the other. The Angel. What is it? The Purple Angel? I'm trying to remember. All of a
You're
sudden, I'm
close.
drawing a blank.
You're putting
I'm
two together. You're putting Purple Destroyer and Dark
Purple
Angel together.
Destroyer. That's right. I'm sorry. I apologize. I totally drew a blank there.
That's all
Of
right. That's
course.
all right.
So tell me about how you came up with either of those gimmicks, both of those gimmicks.
Well, it's actually Purple Destroyer wasn't even my idea. I had started out wrestling. My very first gimmick was Powerhouse.
Okay.
Because at that time, and at that time when I was younger, I had the butch haircut, the very short, flat top haircut, and Ox used to always refer to me as Crusher. He's like, you look like the Crusher. He's like, you remind me of the Crusher. So, I actually had a contract with Powerhouse Gym where they provided me all their T-shirts and stuff. So that's how I came out with the name Powerhouse. And I started out with that, and my finishing move was the claw and all kinds of good stuff with that. And then eventually that evolved to a character named the Archangel.
Okay.
And I was the Archangel for a little while. At that time, I had started doing some other than New England Pro Wrestling. I started working with a company out of Connecticut. They did not live very long, but they did have a lot of talent that went in and out for about the 3 or 4 months that they were in business. It was called New Era Wrestling Alliance, NEWA. They were out of the New Britain area. And my God, they had Tony Atlas, April Hunter. They had a bunch of names that went through there. My very first night with the company, um, they put me over for the championship. It was a tournament, and I ended up in the ring at the end of the show with Gino Caruso out of New Jersey. And Gino, he's talking to me, I'm green as hell. He's talking to me through the whole thing and gets me in the center of the ring. He's like, can you do a pump handle suplex? I went, let's try it. I said, I have no idea, to be honest with you. He's like, are you sure you want to try it? So let's try it. So he's like, he walked me through it. Boom, went up, pump handle. No, I mean, like I'd done it all my life. So I rolled out of the ring. I powdered out, and I'm walking around the ring, and doing my thing. And I get to the point where I'm supposed to be. We had somebody in the audience, basically, that was a plant, and I'm supposed to be jaw jacking with them. Well, Gino's supposed to come up behind me and hit me with a steel chair. Well, he couldn't find a steel chair, so he ended up breaking a bar stool over my back.
Wow.
That did not feel good. But so from there, I was friends with a guy out of the New England area. You may know who he is. he was, you know, around for quite a while in the New England area, the real deal Joel Davis.
Yep.
And him and I, you know, one time were like really tight, really good friends. And I'd been to his house, broke bread with him before. And his ex-fiance was actually from Connecticut. That's, you know, so he said to me one day, he says, hey, he says, I'm working with this organization. You might have heard of them called the NWA. I said, well, who hasn't heard of the NWA? He's like, I work with one of their territories. He's like, why don't you come on up? I said, all right. So I remember walking into the locker room for the first time with Joel Davis. Well, of course, nobody there knew who I was because I was still so green, so new. And everybody starts, you know, hushing and, you know, thinking I'm just a fan walking through the locker room. So now they're, you know, they're trying to just, you know what I'm saying. So turn around and Joel introduces me to the Boston bad boy, Jason Rumble. And he says, you know, he says, I think I can use you. I said, okay, good. Now, by this time, even though I was still pretty new to the business, I say new to the business, but I had already been in it for almost 8 years. But at this time, I hadn't wrestled a whole lot. You know,
Right.
I was still that guy that was working just, you know, the show here and there when he was booked. And Jason says, yeah, we can do something with you. Literally, as I was getting ready to walk out to the ring, they were just about to introduce me. And Jason looks at me and goes, by the way, we're changing your name from Archangel to Dark Angel. I'll explain when you come back. I went, okay, whatever. So that's how the Dark Angel was born. I went from Archangel to Dark Angel. And from that, it was told to me is because in NWA at that time, they had a tag team that had been out for a little while, but they were in the process of making their return, who were called the Archangels. So they didn't want to get the confusion going on. From that, my character kind of evolved from the Dark Angel to Big DA.
Okay.
And from that, this was, I want to say, probably 2004, 2005 now. I got to a point in my career where I realized that I was much better behind the microphone than I ever was in the ring. So I kind of spoke with Jason and, you know, I was part of the Brotherhood. I was part of the second generation Brotherhood. And as we say in the Brotherhood, you're not having fun until you got to dial 911. And Jason and I are still pretty tight. You know, we still have that Brotherhood. Matter of fact, him and I work on another podcast with him and produce it for him. So part of the Brotherhood, and I created this other character. And when I created the character, I never thought that this character would blow up the way that he did. But then as time went on and as the character evolved, I realized that, well, that's not a character at all. That's really me just changing my name up a little bit. When I was a little kid, my grandfather always used to call me Mickey. So Mickey is my name. I mean, that's me. But the Biggs part of it is the gimmick. The Biggs part of it is the character. And I just threw that because I was always a big guy. And I created that character, and Jason asked me, well, how do you want to do this? I said, well, for a while, I'm going to stay involved with NWA New England and the NWA territories. I said, but I said, I want to do something with this dual character. I said, I just don't know what yet. So then I created this whole storyline into which MIcky Byggs and the Dark Angel were twin brothers, and we hated each other. I used to do live interviews with myself. And not only would I do live interviews with myself, but I had restraining orders against myself. I was in Boston, Massachusetts, doing a live interview outside of one of the places we were doing appearances at. And Dark Angel interfered in the interview and beat MIcky Byggs up live on air. I had Boston PD standing outside looking at me, after I went off on the commercial break, they're like, are you okay? Do we need to call somebody? Do we need help here? I'm like, nope, I'm fine, brother. I said, just a radio show. That's all. Don't worry about it. We're good. And I've had people come up to me and ask me, why don't you just leave your brother alone? He's just trying to do his job. For years and years and years, even to this day, there's some people that don't realize that we are the same person. And it's because I played it off so well. I mean, typically Mickey Byggs is just like I am right now. Hello, everybody. This is the man, the myth, the legend, the franchise, the monopoly that is Mickey Byggs. And today we have none other than my twin brother, the moron that he is. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one, the only, the shut your mouth, Mickey Byggs. I'll kick your ass. There's anything you or anyone else can do about it, because I am 1/3 of the brotherhood, and we ain't having fun. You got to dial 911. And I would go back and forth like that. And if I was doing it live someplace, Jason couldn't even be around me because he just die laughing in the corner because he's watching this go on. He knows, but half the locker room had no clue. So when you're working the boys and you're getting away with working the boys, you're doing your job.
Tell me about working the NWA New England, and let's see. You mentioned you worked other NWA territories as well. I'm interested in hearing the other territories as well.
Well, most of it was NWA New England, NWA New Jersey, before all that controversy took place over there. A couple of the other, the other territories. Let's see. I did some stuff with West Virginia, Green Mountain.
I remember them.
And I'm trying to remember. That's actually how I met the Maestro. Okay. He was their heavyweight champion, and I had him on my old wrestling talk show, Wrestling Spotlight, many, many times. I'm trying to think what other territories. I think that was it. Though, like I said, the majority of it was NWA New England, NWA Jersey. I can remember NWA New Jersey calling me up saying, "Hey, we want to book you for a show," and he was telling me where the show was. I said, then I really think you need to call Jason Rumble first. Well, why? Because you're coming into NWA New England territory. You need to call Jason Rumble. So he did, and they ended up booking, I think like 4 or 5 of us from NWA New England. And I ended up not doing either one of my gimmicks that night. They actually put me under the hood, and I was basically NWA Jersey's version of WWE's Golga. And they put me in the ring with one of my former tag team partners, the Black Dragon. And of course, being Golga, they put me over. But I remember that night because it's the night that Black Dragon got mad at me. For the very first time in his life, he got mad at me. And he says to me, he goes, "Whatever you do," he goes, I'll go with anything you want to do. I don't care. He goes, "Just don't give me a stink face." I gave him a stink face.
The Pro Wrestling Vault. 35 short stories including Harley Race, Ricky Morton, Tracy Smothers, and Tim Storm. Along with 300 photos from the independent scene. Taken from Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Get your book today by going to WrestleVille.com or LanceByChance.com. WrestleVille, it's where wrestling lives.
Are you a fan of horror movies?
Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead.
What about cult classics?
Your move, creep.
If you are, you'll love Shocking Things. Please search for us on all the major podcasting platforms. To see our social media and a direct link to our podcast, please go to anchor.fm/shockingthings.
So I believe we were talking about working NWA New England and in Jersey territory, or in
NWA New England show at an NWA New Jersey show.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So like I said, I was Golga for the night and gave the Black Dragon the stink face. But then I was saying that I actually did an NWA Jersey show before I was ever even part of the NWA territories by sheer accident. NWA Jersey was doing a show in Torrington, Connecticut. And I went, of course, like any good, wrestler, you have your gear with you. And I'm walking in, and I can't remember who it was. Somebody see me that knew who I was, and he comes running up to me. He's like, "Brother, tell me you got your gear with you." I'm like, "Of course I do." He's like, "I'll be right back." So he came out. At that time, Gino was the promoter of NWA Jersey, and I'm trying to remember his last name. For the life of me, I can't. And
You're not talking Gino Caruso.
no,
Because he was running ECPW. I mean, he still
Right.
does, but yeah.
right.
Okay.
No, it was Gino Moore, I think.
Okay.
I think is what it was. But anyways, Gino comes out and he says, "Hey," he says, he's vouching for you. Tells me you got your gear with you. I said, "Yeah, I do." He's like, "Two of my guys didn't show up." He goes, "Would you be willing to work?" I said, "Yeah, let me go grab my gear." He's, "Oh, whoa, wait a minute. He goes, "Let me ask you first." He goes, "Who trained you?" I said, "Ox Baker." He just looked at me and he just shook his head and he turned around and walked away. He goes, as he's walking away, he goes, "Go get your gear." So I went and got my gear. I come walking back in, and by this time everybody's at the door, and I just walk on through, of course, and I go into the locker room and I'm sitting there, and I was just there to record to record some interviews for another thing that I was working on before I did the whole Mickey Byggs character, and turn around and I hear this voice. I'm like, my God, that sounds familiar. So it was actually then and there that I created the show, my first initial podcast, which was Beyond the Ring, and I walked up to the voice that I could hear, and lo and behold, it was the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time, the Honky Tonk Man. And I said, "Brother," I said, can I do an interview with you?" He's like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I started off with that whole thing of, I'm here with the Honky Tonk, the former WWF Intercontinental Champion. He cut me off. He's like, "The greatest," the whole thing. So that was my very first interview of somebody in the wrestling business that actually aired, the Honky Tonk Man. And then from there, that's when like I said, I ended up creating Wrestling Spotlight and the Mickey Byggs character and all that. But that's how I ended up working. Like I said, the NWA Jersey show. That was the first NWA show I ever worked. Unbeknownst to me, I'd end up with NWA, on a permanent basis for pretty much the remainder of my career.
When did you decide to retire from in-ring competition?
In-ring competition, my last match was in 2007.
Okay.
Of course, I've done little things here and there. Not full-blown matches, but doing commentary, kind of like the old Jim Ross, Michael Cole thing, where I run my mouth a little bit too much and end up, getting myself into trouble, type of thing. But when I retired from in-ring action, from that, I went and started doing MMA for probably the next 3 or 4 years, and worked with a company called Extreme Battle Zone, and became the champion in a tournament. I won the championship the same night Mike Tyson lost to Lennox Lewis.
Okay.
And I remember that night because not only did I lose and he won, but the Sunday before, I was on our radio talk show, and I opened my big mouth. Why I did this, I don't know, but hey, you know what? I did it. I went on the show and I told everybody, and I said, I'm going to go to this tournament. I'm going to win the Extreme Battle Zone Heavyweight Championship. I said, and when I do, I said, if Mike Tyson loses to Lennox Lewis, little did I know he would, I will come back here next week and I will challenge Mike Tyson live on air. So once you know it, Mike Tyson lost, I won. So now I put my foot in my mouth. I had no choice but to go back. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not going to be a good look. So I went in and I did the interview and I said, well, I said, you know what? I said it. I said, so here I am. I challenge Mike Tyson. I said, we will do a match. If he accepts it, we'll do it in an MMA ring in the octagon with boxing rules. Oh my God, what was it? The host looks at me and goes, that's pretty brave of you, don't you think? He goes, well, aren't you worried about getting hit with that right hook of his? I said, bro, I get hit with steel chairs for a living. I'm certainly not worried about that right hook. I said, besides, I said, it only hit me once. I said, then I'll fall. He goes, but what if he bites your ear? I said, I'll bite him back. I said, then I guess we'll be ear to ear, won't we? So it actually got a little bit of publicity. I did hear from his people for about 30 seconds, but it never, nothing after that. It was just like a 30-second, well, why should we fight you type of thing. And that was pretty much it. So I did get my 30 seconds of fame with that, in MMA. But how I got started with MMA is, as we spoke about the other day, I'm good friends with Dan the Beast Severn.
Right.
And, I've been up to the sports camp and he's always been one of my mentors, so to speak. Everything I've done when it comes to MMA has been modeled after him.
Right.
I actually read an article the other day. Somebody says, well, why is everybody so hype on Dan Severn? Well, what did Dan Severn do? And I'm like, well, and I responded to it. I'm like, well, what did Dan Severn do? Well, let's see. He pretty much single-handedly forced a company like the UFC to accept wrestling as a form of self-defense.
Right. I mean, not for nothing, he pretty much won those early championships through wrestling, through grappling, pure grappling. I mean, and he was one of the greatest wrestlers of all time at that time period.
Absolutely.
And this is, without going into, say, the mainstream professional wrestling organizations. That came later on, well later into his career, and it didn't even matter at that point. And he held the most prestigious. He held the most prestigious world title in the professional wrestling history.
Absolutely.
The NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and that's why we're here today on the NWA Spotlight, our debut episode, to sit here and talk about the National Wrestling Alliance, past, present, and future. It's my favorite championship. It's my favorite organization of all time. And
absolutely, and without the NWA, professional wrestling wouldn't be what it is today.
Correct.
If there was no NWA, there would be no WWF, WWE, WCW, AEW, ROH, ECW. None of that would have existed without the NWA. Even another, and I don't like to talk bad about any organization.
Right.
And I won't talk bad about them. But there's another company out there that is very similar to the way the NWA territories were at one time. And they're doing their best to keep that territory action alive. And I've worked with them, and they're known as the AIWF.
Right.
But they wouldn't exist if it wasn't for a company like the NWA.
Right.
And a lot of professional wrestling, or not even a lot of, I would say 100% of professional wrestling owes their roots to the NWA.
Some of those companies you even just mentioned were at one point a part of the NWA.
Even the
ECW.
WWE.
Yep, the ECW, the WWF. WWF left and came back to the NWA on multiple occasions. And I
Yep.
believe that it was 1982 that they left for good, if I remember correctly.
I think it was 82. It was either 82 or 84, one or the other. I
Right.
don't remember which.
Yeah, I almost said 84, but I wasn't 100% certain. So, but either it was around that time period that, they left multiple times, and they recognized, I mean, while they did recognize someone like Bruno as their champion, they also had the NWA champion on their biggest shows, say at the Garden and whatnot.
Which is why I thought it was interesting, because they were no longer part of the NWA. But which is why I thought it was interesting that they allowed Dan the Beast Severn to come into the WWE with the NWA World Title,
Right?
And defend it.
Yes.
And back in the day, like if
that was all Cornette's doing, though, because he was still
absolutely
a very big part of the NWA at that time period.
Between him and Dennis Carluzza, please,
and Howard, they all made
and Howard Brody. And
here's a little tidbit: the NWA, Howard Brody and Dennis Carluzzo made their first appearance as part of the NWA on WWF TV in New Haven, Connecticut, at the at a SmackDown taping. I was at that show. Yep, and that's where they presented the NWA North American Championship.
Absolutely correct. And but I mean, let's face it. Like I just said, if it wasn't for the NWA, number one, all these companies wouldn't exist today, and number two, more importantly, half the wrestlers on the rosters wouldn't exist today.
Right.
I mean, if there wasn't people like Harley Race, Ric Flair, Dick Murdoch, Roddy Piper, Jake the Snake Roberts, Scott Hall, if it wasn't for people like that coming up through the NWA, wrestling wouldn't be the mainstream that it is today. I don't care what anybody says.
Yep. Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, obviously, there's when I discovered professional wrestling, in 1984, and I've said this on my PWZ podcast many times, that I fell in love with professional wrestling, but I didn't discover the NWA until maybe a couple years later. And once I discovered the NWA, World Championship Wrestling and on TBS and all that stuff, that immediately became the favorite wrestling. It was something about the presentation. As you're going over to the WWF, it's a little gimmicky, it's a little cartoony. You got a guy called the Junkyard Dog who comes in and does a dance, and you got a guy walking out with the snake. You got to get an Elvis impersonator, but then you got these guys, and the NWA is presented like it was a legitimate sport. The arena wasn't lightened up just to show how many thousands of people were in the arena. It was darkened and just focused,
smoke-filled.
Yeah, it was focused on what was happening in the ring, and the commentators presented it as if it was a legitimate contest and a legitimate sport, and that meant so much to me. Mind you, I'm probably going back maybe 10 years old. You know what I mean? And that just meant so much to me. And it's like a lot of 10-year-olds are going into the gimmicky stuff, but for some reason, that legitimacy meant so much to me, and that's how I fell in love with the NWA. Even, there was other organizations like the AWA and stuff like that were similar, but for some reason it was the NWA, and I still... That's the majority of what I watch, even today's NWA.
Right, and I was just saying, and you know what separates the NWA from the rest of it? It's the fact, like you just said, number one, there is no flashy gimmicks. It's not cartoony. I mean, let's face it. What was Dusty Rhodes' thing for years and years and years and years to the day he died? The son of a plumber.
Right.
Who cannot relate to being just an average Joe?
Yep. Yes.
And that's what the NWA was. It was like the average Joe. And it was like your grandfathers, your fathers, your uncles, anybody that you could relate to in your family who was a tough SOB, going out there and just showing that they were tough.
Right.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
And as much as everybody wants to try to say that, oh, well, the belt doesn't have the same prestige as it once did. I'm sorry. I disagree with that.
I'm going to just say, honestly, and there were times where that might have been true. There were times.
There are times.
Certain champions that they've had, and I'm not, and no offense to the guy, I'm sure he's a great guy, but say somebody like the Colorado Kid, Mike Rapata, as the NWA World Champion. Okay?
Who?
I don't know what you... Exactly. I mean, I can't think of many that are worse. I'm sure that's probably the worst. But that I could think of, and no offense to the guy, like I said. But
there were some poor choices that were definitely made, and champions that were made champion that probably shouldn't have been.
Right.
But at that same point, you look at how long did these people hold the belt though?
Mm-hmm.
Did they hold it for extended periods of time? Were they transitional champions? What was it? But then there's guys like the current NWA World Champion. Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. And it took me a little bit to getting used to, and I could sit here and argue with you if you'd like about it. But the guy is and I'll just tell you why, and let me get my point across. But the guy is a good businessman. Okay, he's good at getting attention on himself, and if he's walking around with that NWA World Title, he's going to be getting attention on that NWA and the NWA World Title. The guy is probably one of the hottest independent wrestlers going right now. You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying he's the world's greatest professional wrestler, because I do not agree with that part. I think that his character tends to be annoying, but I don't. In the beginning, I did not think it was necessarily a great choice, but I could see why they went with that choice.
Okay, now I'm going to rebut part of what you just said.
Go for it.
Yes, he does get a lot of attention, and he does get a lot of media on himself. But the key thing there is it's media on himself. He doesn't care about any organization that he's with. He doesn't care about anything that he's doing other than himself. And as far as I'm concerned, there is such a thing known as bad media. And if you have somebody that is being very selfish in the way that they do things and casting that negativity out to the world that he casts out because of his basic character,
mm-hmm.
it does not put a good light on the NWA World Title. And yes, he's getting that exposure for the NWA, but is it good exposure? The only thing that I can think of that might be good about that is when they see him as the NWA World Champion, they might tune in now just to see who it is that's going to take the belt from him.
I guess you got a point there. I was convinced this past Sunday that Nick Aldis was going to be taking it back. At the same time, I there's something in the back of my head saying that it's most likely not going to happen. And obviously, I'm sure you watched. I know you didn't watch the Crockett Cup. You watched this week's NWA Power, so
yep.
To find out that he didn't, and I'm gonna wonder who it is that's going to be taking that title off of him. Who they're going to bring in. Or if it's just going to be somebody like Aldis again, if they meet again, which it seems like they built it up for another meeting.
I have my theory on who it's going to be.
Share it with the world.
I have a theory that it is going to be a former NWA World Champion, and I have a theory that it is going to be the same exact guy that takes the belt from him that was responsible for him just retaining the world title. Mr. Double J, Jeff Jarrett.
You think Jeff Jarrett's going to come back at this day and age and win the NWA world title?
I do. Listening to his interview.
I need a drink. Oh my God. I think that, and don't get me wrong, I love Jeff Jarrett. I love what he's done in professional wrestling. I've been following Jeff Jarrett since, like, say, 1987 in CWA in Memphis, and I was very excited when he came in to the WWF, and I just think that I don't know, man. I love his history with the NWA as well, with TNA and such, but I don't see how that could happen.
It's gonna be a transitional thing, but
Okay.
it's basically, my theory is they're gonna set it up because he's gonna turn around and it's gonna eat him alive. What happened? He's gonna go back. He's gonna come out. And he's gonna be like, I went back. I was looking at the footage. I see where my error was, and I really got to correct this. I've got to make this right. And he's going to end up challenging Cardona. They're going to put him over for the belt for the NWA World Title, and then he's going to turn around and drop it sometime shortly thereafter to like a Nick Aldis or somebody like that.
I find that very interesting. You've kind of, wow, now you got me thinking. That's very strange. There's also been a theory, and I was watching another NWA podcast that in Alliance Dash Wrestling, and I believe that there was discussion of Jack Stane possibly taking the title.
I did say that a few weeks back. You and I were talking about that, and I did say Jack Stane. He's deserving of it, and
former NWA champion as it is.
Former NWA World Champion. He is deserving of it, and that could be, part of that transition. Maybe it won't be Nick Aldis. Maybe it would be Jack Stane. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I really think I don't know. This gut feeling of mine is telling me that they're going to continue to work this angle with Jeff Jarrett a little bit more. And you could see in his interview that he just did from yesterday, from NWA Power, that he wasn't necessarily happy about his decision. And the way he came across, he was very remorseful. But at the very end of it, he's like, and the end result is Matt Cardona is the world heavyweight champion.
Right.
I really truly think, and because he made it a point to say in this interview, I'm the only guy out there. I'm the only one there. I have to do the best that I can. And it's not like I can go back and, watch the footage. I can't go back and replay booth. And he made a point to say all this. So I think it's part of a bigger angle where he's going to come out and he's like, I really looked over all the footage. I looked over all the different angles of everything. And I made an error. I made a mistake, and now I've got to correct that error. My gut feeling tells me something like that is going to happen.
I find it interesting to see where this goes now that you threw that in there. I do.
Like I said, I've been around this business a long time, and you and I have spoke. You've heard some of my ideas for different things, yes. And I don't know. I see this. I just see this happening.
So on top of that, obviously we're gearing towards NWA Power for this week.
Yes.
I quite enjoyed this. Over the last couple months, I thought that NWA Power was lacking here and there, quite a bit actually. This episode that aired yesterday, I thought was actually a very good episode. It was built. You got to they revealed. I wouldn't say revealed, but Trevor Murdoch revealed basically his new character, I guess you'd say. He's angrier. He's not happy that the fans were not behind him. I think that could work. What's your opinion there?
I think he's morphing into what Dick Murdoch used to be.
Is he
that
gonna be
very disgruntled Murdoch. And I like it. I think it suits him. The only thing that I really truly hope is he doesn't come back to the ring like he did with the WWF and have that stink face look on his face all the time.
I think that's what he has permanently. I think that's just permanent.
It's like, I guess I just haven't seen him too much on NWA yet. I haven't had a chance to watch a whole lot of it,
Right.
but being in this business, it kind of keeps you busy, so you don't get
Right.
to watch too much of it anymore. But yeah, I like Trevor Murdoch. I think he's a good talent. Um, I've spoken with him on Facebook a bunch of times. Uh, he's just, I don't know. Was he right for the NWA championship? I can't say that he was. I can't say that he wasn't. But he definitely has that old school feel, that old school lineage behind him.
Trained by the legendary Harley Race as well.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, was he not good for the NWA championship? I mean, I think that then the NWA needed a change, and who were they really going to put on at that time period? And I thought that kind of helped out a lot, putting him in there in
Oh,
that title
absolutely.
picture. And I think
Absolutely.
it
It was a good
helps.
choice.
Yeah. Though I don't feel like he really held that belt for that long. Um, and it might not have mattered in the end. It might not have worked out to the way that they had actually planned it. Is what I'm trying to say. I think that they thought it was going to go over a lot better than it did.
Well, I mean, let's face it, it went over better than them giving the belt to Cody Rhodes.
He only held it for what, a couple months though, too, right? He was
Yeah,
basically,
but
and then
that's my point.
Yeah.
You would have thought with the name Rhodes, they would have had him hold it a little bit longer.
I think it was
But
to try to, my personal opinion, I think that was them to try to get more attention and more, uh, some more tickets to the NWA 70th anniversary show. Because they knew,
I
because
agree.
you know what I mean? Like he wanted that all out or all in, whatever it was called. And then, they met again just a couple months later at the NWA 70th anniversary show, which was basically the first actual event that Billy Corgan had held since owning the NWA for I think over a year.
I agree.
So I think it made sense, to put that title on him for however long he had it, a month or two. And, I think that's all it was for.
It did make sense.
Yeah.
But the thing is, could they have let him hold it a little bit longer? Of course they could have.
Sure.
Would
Absolutely.
would they have been better off right now with him holding the title? I don't know.
No.
I don't know. Let's face it. Cody Rhodes is good, but he's no Dusty.
Yes.
For that matter, he's no Dustin.
Correct.
So would it have made a difference? Probably not. Was it a good choice at that time? Absolutely, because he was fresh on everybody's mind of leaving the WWE. He was fresh on the mind of everybody because of the stir he was making because of the all in or all out or all we pay-per-view, whatever they wanted to call it. And he was fresh on everybody's mind for that. So it made good business sense for them to say, hey, let's make him the champ. We can go on his coattails with this, and we can see what's going on with Cody, and let's make some money.
Right.
And that's what they did. Like I said, I don't think it would have made a difference one way or the other if they had let him be champion, for 100 days. I really don't think it would have made a difference. He's just not of that same caliber.
Cody, you mean on the same
Cody.
level as Dusty and Dustin?
Oh, not at all. Let's face
I
it.
don't.
Dusty Rhodes,
I don't think so.
Dusty Rhodes came in at a time when everybody, was NWA. Dustin Rhodes came in at that time when everybody was NWA. It was at that time of the NWA WCW mess that came about. But Dustin grew up with all that time in the NWA territory area, where Cody, he might have had a few matches in the territories, but he was never NWA.
Correct.
He's a WWE guy. That's how I look at Cody.
He's processed in their system. He didn't train outside. He processed in their system and gone through was it FCW and put right on TV. He didn't work the Indies or the NWA growing. You get what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
He didn't spend years working the Indies or the NWA to get to the WWE. He was processed through WWE because he was Dusty's kid.
I mean, hell, let's face it. I don't even think he spent any time in Ohio Valley when that was a WWE run thing.
I think when he joined, I think they already had FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I think so
so
too.
I think OVW was not a part of it already, like a few years prior to that. If I could be mistaken, I could be off by a few years, but I don't think I am. So,
but I mean, it's just he's not the same caliber of his father or brother.
He thinks he is, though.
In his mind, he is.
Yeah, that's why he's got all these gigantic contracts out there. But that's another thing for another podcast.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to spend. Yeah, I don't want to be talking this much about Cody here. We already gave him enough attention. I mean, talking about him in the NWA Championship, but it will be interesting to see what will happen in the next couple of weeks with his WWE appearance, if it actually does happen. Rumor is that it will. But
they say that he signed his contract 10 to 14 days ago, so we'll see.
Yep, that's what they're saying, but so we'll see.
I mean, it would definitely be interesting, but
yep,
yeah. Now, I think it would be even more interesting if he showed up on NWA somewhere.
I mean, I wouldn't have doubted that he would have at one point prior to signing his contract, but I wouldn't think that it would be more than just like a one shot.
Right. So now that we're talking about, guys, WWE, what is your opinion of a lot of these guys that were WWE that are now NWA, like Titus or Tyrus, Chris Masters? What do you think of them now that they're out of that machine, so to speak, and in a place like the NWA?
Tyrus, I think, is useless. I know, and it's just I don't care for him at all. Did you see his first match when he debuted at the pay-per-view over a year ago? The guy basically blew up walking to the ring, and it was only like 5 feet from the apron, from the gear, from the curtain to the ring.
I mean, we are talking about a funkadactyl.
I'm just saying, it was just completely like he was blown up, just basically squashing somebody, and it was crazy. Chris Masters, I could see them using for potential, and maybe if Tyrus has grown a little bit on me, but he was I'm still not convinced so much. Chris Masters, I can see them using. Trying to think of who else was in there. Some of these guys that were in
Trevor
WWE.
Murdoch.
Yeah, Trevor Murdoch. I mean, Trevor Murdoch is pretty much he's a guy out there that's got a real day job now. You know what I mean? So he's going in there working the NWA. Going out for long weekends, doing TV tapings. You know what I'm saying? Like he had his days in the WWE. He wasn't ever in there for that long. You know what I mean? Never really caught on with the mainstream. So, yeah, I don't. Some of these guys, I don't really care. I think it's like, but back in the day, guys went from territory to territory. That's what people don't understand. Always complain in this day and age that AEW is taking all these WWE guys or what have you. But I'm just like, same thing happened 60s, 70s, 80s. Everybody went from territory to territory when they got sick of work, not necessarily sick of, but tired in a territory, or people lost interest in the territory.
I just got done watching Ricky Morton against Austin Aries.
That was a pretty good match, I thought.
It was. It was a good match. Yeah, and now that we said that, though, what about those older guys like Ricky Morton? Years and years and years in the business, came up through the NWA, former NWA World Tag Team Champion. To this day, still wrestling in an event with somebody like Austin Aries.
Ricky Morton has proved at his age that he can still go.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a guy that did not take care of his body over the years. He fully
Absolutely.
admits that he partied and drugged and alcohol and all that stuff. And he smoked heavy for a while too. So, but he's a guy that could still damn move. You know what I mean? He's had some good matches. He wrestled Nick Aldis to a damn good match, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
About 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit longer than that. I could be off by the time.
But I mean, a true legend.
Yeah,
True
absolutely.
legend.
Hell of a
And,
nice guy on top of it.
Yes, absolutely. And you put him in the ring with somebody like Austin Aries, who came up through Impact, and I mean,
Ring of Honor and all those guys.
It amazes me that with all the talent that NWA has, all the notable talent that NWA has, and I'll even throw Matt Cardona in this one, with all the notable talent that NWA has on their roster right now, that they're not bigger than what they are.
I understand that because since they've come back from the pandemic, they've struggled because I think that they
Absolutely.
were, and before the pandemic, if you look at, they were about to hold the Crockett Cup, their second version of the Crockett Cup. The arena that they actually were about to go into held several thousand people. And they announced this whole thing, and then all of a sudden, boom, everything got canceled. The Crockett Cup was canceled, and everything was just out there, out the window.
Absolutely.
So the NWA was on a really good roll in getting bigger, but then closing for over a year did not help them. They were very busy keeping with online content, excuse me, on their YouTube channel. All the talents were doing like daily, basically, I would say, kind of podcasts on YouTube. You know what I mean? They had some sort of series that they were having on there every single day. Then all of a sudden, that guy Dave Lagana got in some trouble, disappeared, and then the NWA just shut down entirely, completely. So the NWA, they came back the last year. They've been struggling. I mean, there's times where I was really excited when they came back. I rented the pay-per-view, and I was very disappointed, to be honest with you. You get what I'm saying? But so it's like they did have that potential, and they were on that level of becoming bigger, but the pandemic shut it down. And ever since the year that they've been back, they haven't quite gotten there again. It's going to take some time to build that up again. You'd think they would have done it already, but there's something there that's lacking. I think it's maybe Billy Corgan's booking himself, him running the show basically himself, could be a part of it. I don't agree with some of his booking decisions. I don't agree with him having multiple multi-way matches on a show and on a 1-hour television program.
Right.
Like 3-way or 4-way matches on one 1-hour television program. That drives me nuts. I'm a traditionalist. I like to see typical one-on-one or straight tag team matches, but I understand the fans like certain things, but it's like, I think that some of his booking decisions have been very questionable from a fan's standpoint.
I agree. No, even as a wrestling standpoint, I agree. To me, he books very much like Tony Khan does.
Hot shotting, basically.
He doesn't know enough about the business to book effectively.
Right.
And the thing is, he's got all these people around him, like the Velvet Skies, the
Tim Storm,
the Tony Storms,
Pat Kinney.
all these. Yeah, I mean, all these people that have been around the business. Even like Ricky Moore, and just say, hey, tug him by the coattails and say, hey, would you mind helping me out with this?
Right.
And creating content, no pun intended, to put asses in the seats.
Right.
For what he's doing, he's okay. But I've got to be honest, and Jason Rumble and I have had this conversation in the past. I'm an NWA guy through and through. I love NWA, past, present, and future. But honestly, I have seen more of a crowd in old school NWA territories than I have the entire time I've seen on anything recent for NWA.
You go back to like we were just talking about at the 70th anniversary show that's at the Nashville Fairgrounds, where a group like Burt Prentice's group or the Jarretts, and when they were running TNA, they would pack that place.
Absolutely.
When Billy booked NWA 70, it was a packed place. It was very packed. But it's just, and then they started doing the Power TV show, like a studio type setting, and it doesn't seem like they're gunning for bigger places, and they're not attempting to, like, when they are, they're half empty. If you ever looked at when they went back to the Chase after years and years of years, the NWA being away from the Chase in St. Louis, right? Yeah, that there was some episodes where there was matches and there was literally no one in the crowd. 10 people, but 50, 30.
I'm watching
Come on.
NWA Power. I mean, not NWA Power. NWA Power. Let me say. I'll tell you right now what it is. It is NWA USA, Episode 10, Season 1.
Let's see which one. I got an NWA USA on now. Season 1, Episode 9.
There's
just came
nobody
out.
in the audience.
Yeah. And they surround the ring. I like the new setup in the studio where they surround the ring as opposed to those bleacher seating and just having everybody separated and it look like there's two people in
Let
the
me
crowd.
see. Can I switch my camera view here? Hold on.
I don't know if you can do it live. Might be able to. But I don't mind the setup. There's just a lot of, I just don't understand what he wants to do. Like, does he want? I understand he wants to hold on to the legacy of the NWA, but you got a gun. Like, the NWA is possibly is the most important wrestling brand in the history of professional wrestling.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So they need to gun for something bigger.
Your camera went off, by the way.
My camera went off.
Yes.
My camera. I could still see me in my camera.
I see your logo, PWZ.
Oh, hell. How about now? Better?
You're still there, but I don't see you. I just see PWZ.
The one that was there before? I don't know why it's just me. I don't know. Maybe you were playing with something because I could still see you. I'm gonna take a screenshot. Watch this. I'm gonna take a screenshot of it, and it'll.
Now I see you.
Okay. All right. Good. I'm leaving that part in, by the way. So yeah. Back to Power from yesterday. So I want to talk about a couple of the matches that happened. OGK, Matt Taven, and Mike Bennett took on the Briscoes. I thought this was one of the best matches that Power has held in a long time. And I'm not talking. I would agree. I mean, this was straight up just like nonstop great wrestling match, great tag team wrestling match. They, in a small studio setting. Did you expect to see the Briscoes working the NWA studios? To be honest with you,
honestly, no. I'm not a big
Me
fan
neither.
of the Briscoes, anyways, and I didn't expect to see them there, especially after they just, did whatever they're doing with AEW. I really didn't expect to.
I don't know what they're doing there, but yeah, I haven't seen. I haven't watched. So
I guess from what I understand, they've signed with AEW or some nonsense.
Okay.
And they're going to be doing some big thing with FTR or FTW.
Okay. I've heard some stories that they're supposed to be jumping over with, but I haven't been. I watched one match last week, the Thunder Rosa match.
Yes.
And I was. A hell of a match. But my work schedule was that I normally work through AEW on Wednesday night, so I normally watch it Thursday mornings, but I haven't even watched that full episode yet. I just watched the main event.
It's so bad. I'm part of this, now with you, and I do the one with Jason Rumble on, Friday, Saturday, whichever day we do. The amount of wrestling I watch, I don't know how I ever actually get through anything because I really don't get to watch a lot of it because I'm always on the road doing something. Yeah. There was a couple, things that I was working on today that you saw. I sent you the 2 videos. I'm constantly in a studio doing stuff like that. And, between that and, I talk with Mario Mancini constantly and coming up with, different ideas and different things.
Right.
And, I don't have time to watch it. I don't know how I ever get through shows like this because I just don't know how, I've paid any attention. Who is this guy?
I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I work 3 jobs and I try to watch as much as I can as far as wrestling. But what it boils down to is that I make time to sit and watch NWA Power on Tuesdays, NWA USA on Saturday mornings. I make sure that I am if I'm not working, Um, I'll try to tune into AEW, some WWE, but it's very difficult.
I can't even watch AEW. I really can't.
There's some things I like. Some things, I went to the Bridgeport show that they had, and it was incredibly long. They recorded for 3. Well, not recorded for, but they recorded for 3 shows. Plus the live show. So it was like, they recorded for like Elevation, which is a YouTube series, and then their Friday night series, and then they went live for 2 hours, and it was just incredibly, incredibly long. I couldn't really take it, So
Yeah,
it didn't seem like they put all their. It didn't seem like, and they didn't put their whole heart into coming into Bridgeport.
I can't get through an hour show. I'll start watching it and literally I will fall asleep. No joke. And it's nothing against AEW. It's just that their storylines are non-existent. And the funny thing is NWA doesn't have any real storylines either, but it's the way that it's presented.
I get you. Yeah.
It's presented in a much different I'm still trying to figure out who this guy is. Magic Jake Dumas?
That's the magician guy, right? Where it comes out with the cigarette. Is that guy?
Yeah. Is he the only guy that comes out with music?
That part
He had music playing of some kind. I guess he's the only person that comes out with music.
So I've watched him. I've seen him twice so far. He's not very. I don't know what to think of that guy yet. He's just.
When I first see him, like with the top hat and everything on, when I first see the camera angle, I actually thought it was Canyon, but I know that's impossible.
That's impossible. Yeah.
But then he came up with his name Dumas. I was like, well, is he related to Lita?
That's the first thing I thought of initially, but I was like, I'm sure we would have heard something. Did I mention the junior heavyweight championship match? Austin Aries took on champion Homicide this week, which I thought was a great match. I love Homicide.
Really good match. I love Homicide too.
Homicide is great. The first time I ever saw him, he took on Steve Carino, Fairfield, Connecticut, at a Ring of Honor show, and he kept stabbing Carino with a fork. It was pretty amazing. That was my first time, I think, experiencing anything like that live and in person.
So speaking of Steve Carino, because Steve Carino is a former NWA World Heavyweight Champion.
That is correct.
This was back in the day when NWA New England was doing shows.
Mm-hmm.
I was completely responsible for booking a show in Connecticut. It took place in East Hartford at the old theater over there. And it was part of the NWA New England.
Where in Connecticut did you say?
East Hartford. It was over at the old theater on Main Street.
Okay.
So it was part of the NWA New England Summer Sizzler Tour. And I booked Jason Rumble one-on-one with Steve Carino for the NWA World title. Now, at that time, Jason Rumble had just recently lost the NWA Junior World title. That same night, we had Snuka on the card. I went all out and booked. But it was that same night that I had the restraining order on myself. And MIcky Byggs was on the outside of the arena doing an interview with me from the inside of the arena. And the old wrestling spotlight crew, who Dark Angel ended up basically annihilating. But what made that night so special was not the fact that Jason Rumble became the NWA World Heavyweight Champion for all of 45 seconds that night because the match was continued. But because halfway through the match, Jason Rumble and Steve Carino both stopped wrestling and refused to wrestle until the crowd became more active, because they were all just sitting there like bumps on a log and really were not interested in that old school clinic that they were putting on, to the point where Steve Carino got on the microphone and was like, what's going on? He's like, I come out, and we had a good crowd. I mean, we had about 2,000 people. He was like, I come out here. He goes, I've got, 1,500, 2,000 people here. He goes into a state that calls himself the Nutmeg State. He goes, I think I'm surrounded by a bunch of nuts right now. Can't appreciate a good classic wrestling match like this. So the crowd finally started getting into it. And then, of course, when Jason won the belt, they went ecstatic. But then, like I said, then they started the match all over again. And 45 seconds later, Steve Carino won. So it officially went into the record book for like 45 seconds that he was the world champion. But of course, it wasn't recognized by the NWA because it wasn't sanctioned as far as a win is concerned. It was sanctioned as far as the NWA title being defended, but they didn't sanction him losing the belt, obviously. So I remember that night very well because Steve Carino cursed me out awful. I asked him, I said, how was your trip in, brother? He says, who the hell is the person that I was speaking to on the phone? I'm like, that was me. Why? What's up? He goes, son of a bitch. He goes, you had me lost. He goes, I was on this highway. I should have been on this one. He goes, I was going up this way. He goes, oh my God. Come to find out, it wasn't my fault. It was, he got stuck in construction and they rerouted it. But yeah, Steve Carino, my opinion, one of the best champions in NWA.
Yeah, I really enjoyed him and his work. He's a great wrestler, man. He was a tremendous wrestler, and he did a lot for the NWA. And I mean, that name, Mr. Old School, is not just a name for him. You know,
Absolutely.
it's not just a name. He was really into the old style NWA stuff, and he knew his stuff. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's a guy that you can consider him a historian, so to speak. You know, he would know.
Yep, and I see great things going on with his son too.
I think, I didn't get a chance to see much of Colby prior to Lightning One era of NWA. But now that he's in here, I'm really, and it took me a little bit, but I'm really enjoying him. Teaming up with the Fixers and them, their reign of terror, so to speak, on the current NWA.
Absolutely. And he's he's got a great wrestling mind on his shoulders. I mean, your father, Steve Carino, how can you not?
Right.
Right. I would like to think that outside of a name, he has absorbed a great deal of that wrestling knowledge of his father.
Right. Exactly.
Yep. So, but NWA in a whole, like I said, I bleed NWA through and through. I've been a fan of the NWA as far as I can remember. Wrestled for the NWA. I was truly, truly, truly annoyed when NWA basically lost their national spotlight and it became WCW.
When I was a kid and that happened, it confused me a little bit as to, and I still remember referring to it for the NWA for as long as I can remember. Even though they changed all the logos. I mean, the logos were all the same, but they just changed the lettering to NWA.
Yep.
If you remember.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And that's what kills me, because everybody, well, I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of people get confused and like, oh, well, the NWA died years ago.
It didn't.
WCW bought them out. No, you got that wrong.
WCW was a part of
didn't buy
it.
them out.
Yeah.
WCW was
Yeah.
a part of the NWA and separated themselves from it.
Jim Crockett basically was, sold his portions to
Exactly.
Ted Turner, and then the NWA. They didn't like the way that the belt was being represented. So the NWA separated from them. They would have an allegiance again for a short period, like a year or so later, but then that didn't last long either.
Nope, not at all. And it just, and then yes, I understand it is part of the NWA history as far as Ric Flair being the world champion and being the WCW world champion, but I will never, ever, 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 ever. You and I had this conversation a while back. I will never, ever recognize the big gold belt as the NWA World Championship.
It technically wasn't. Yes.
And
if you go back and actually read the history books, it actually was not part of
correct.
the NWA.
It was the belt that Jim Crockett Promotions made for his territory, but when push came to shove, when Ric Flair lost the NWA World title in Japan, he lost the NWA World title and still maintained the WCW World title.
Right.
And he carried the big gold belt while the NWA Championship went to the guy that beat him in Japan.
Right.
So I don't care what anybody feels. I don't care what anybody says. That belt is not NWA, and it never will be, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Yes.
And the history of the NWA. I don't know how many people realize this, but if you look back in some of the old NWA archives, and when I mean the archives, I don't mean any of the videos. I mean actually read their history.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they've been around, quote unquote, since 1948. But if you actually read their history and read what the NWA was before they became incorporated in 1948 as the NWA,
right,
their history dates back to Abraham Lincoln taking the NWA, quote unquote, Missouri State Championship in Salem, Illinois.
Really?
From the town bully.
Wow. I didn't. Okay. So that title eventually became part of the NWA, right?
Eventually, because it's part of their history.
Right.
It was one of those territory belts, I guess you could say, be back before the NWA became the NWA. But they recognized that as part of their history. Like if we could go back to the old NWA page from years ago, and go into their history section, it actually mentions it in there.
I'm sure there's a place to find it still. We'd have to look that up. We're gonna have to save that for a future episode to do some research on that. I'd love to talk more about that. Yeah, I'd love to talk more about that.
And I mean, it's phenomenal. The history like that is forgotten.
Yes,
you're talking about Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States, was a former NWA wrestling champion. I mean, come on.
It's incredible. It's incredible to think about.
And like I said, yes, of course, it was before NWA was recognized as the NWA. But again, they're claiming it as part of their history. Does it make it any less NWA? No, of course not. Just like something happening today with WWE. It doesn't make it any less part of the old WWF history because they're all one and the same.
Right.
Or something that happened in WWF history.
Capital Sports, whatever.
Right. It's all, or even another example, NWA New England, which was originally Century Wrestling Alliance.
I used to go to some of those shows here in Connecticut. They used to run in town. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you really want to look at it, you go Century Wrestling Alliance, which is NWA New England, which eventually ended up becoming NWA Cold Front.
Yep.
Out of the Maine area. You look at it, yeah, it's all three separate companies, so to speak, but their history is all intertwined because of how the evolution of it happened.
Right.
And that's what people forget. They forget their history. They forget that history exists for a reason. And if it wasn't for history like that, like we said earlier in the show, if it wasn't for history like that, there would be no WWEs, there would be no AEWs, ECWs, Ring of Honors, anything that's out there today wouldn't exist.
Absolutely. You're right. So what else do you have? Do you want to cut it, or do you want to keep going?
And we can go all night as far as
I know that's the.
I can talk about NWA all night. I've got so many different stories that I can talk about. But I can say that, since you and I have started talking about doing this show
Yep.
and doing, different things with it, I do have some news for the fans, and you and I spoke about this, but I do have some news for the fans, and that is that from time to time we will have people stepping into the show with us as special guests. And these people are people from the NWA, past, present, and future. I've got some fairly older NWA people that are interested. I've got some more of the late 90s, early 2000 people that are interested. And of course, I've got a couple people from, NWA Now that I've been talking with. One of those guests, of course, the inaugural NWA guest was yours truly, but people like former NWA President Rich Arpin, former NWA Junior World Heavyweight Champion Jason the Boston Bad Boy Rumble, former NWA World Champion Dan the Beast Severn, former NWA Green Mountain Champion the Maestro of Professional Wrestling Stro, former NWA National Champion Chris. Well, it doesn't go by Masters now, but Chris Adonis. Those are just some of the people that I've been talking with. So we're gonna make it happen. It's gonna be good. And one other thing I want to mention while we're on air right now is I mentioned Rich Arpin and former NWA World Heavyweight. Former NWA president of the NWA. Great guy. But I do got to mention that he's going through some medical issues right now, and we put together a GoFundMe page for him. And I know you shared it earlier today on the page. Rich has shared it. I've shared it. It's out there, and he's going through some major medical issues, and he needs our help. It's he's a brother, and this is a brotherhood, and we all got to stick together. And so everybody, if you can, go check that page out. And even if you can only donate $1, do what you can.
And you could check the link in the description of this episode, because I'm going to put it there as well. Go and donate if you can. It's a really good cause, and you're helping a really good guy.
I'm sorry, changing the subject. NWA 73. Did that happen already?
That happened earlier this year, late last year.
Okay. I just see
Yes.
a promo for it, so I wasn't curious. It didn't say any date or anything. It just said NWA 73 coming soon, so I wasn't sure. And then it showed Ric Flair, so I was
Yeah,
just
he made
curious.
an appearance. It definitely already happened, though.
Okay.
Yep.
But yeah, so he's a great guy and former NWA president, like I said, but he needs our help. When you look at the link in the description and you look at the page for the GoFundMe page, you'll see what I'm talking about. I don't know if you caught part of the story, Rich, where his insurance just isn't covering anything.
No, I read the whole description on the inside of the GoFundMe. So.
And then he found out. I think it was yesterday. Him and I were talking today. I think he found out yesterday or the day before or whatever it was that he's got to have some type of pump surgically implanted in him. And the insurance finally agreed to cover that, but now they won't cover the 3 days of maintenance that he needs on it every week, or the supplies to maintain it, or the person to come in to actually maintain it. So he's got to pay for all this out of pocket.
That's a shame. It really is.
And, and I told him, I said, although I don't know what you're going through personally, I have tons of empathy for you, because my history with this is my mother was on dialysis for 15 years, 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, 3 days a week, with a rare kidney disease that she had for 35 years. She survived breast cancer with a double mastectomy and thyroid cancer twice. I lost my mother 7 years ago this July. She was 60 years old. She died 4 days after her 60th birthday. So I have a lot of empathy for him. I have a lot of sympathy for him. I know in part what he's going through. I watched my mother go through it. And I can tell you, the fans, it's not good. It's not nice. And I mean, he's keeping me updated every step of the way. And we got to help him. Anything, even if it's $1, 50 cents. We just got to keep raising money for him.
Like I said, there's going to be the link in the description of this episode. Please click that link and donate. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, everybody. So I guess we should call it a night there. And,
yes.
Save more NWA stories.
We got a ton of great stories, I'm sure. I mean, me and you have constantly talking, so there's always something, Of course, the NWA continues today, so there's always going to be NWA to talk about.
Absolutely. And I'm going to see if I can do some research on that story about Abraham Lincoln for you.
Yeah, bring that up in the next episode. I'm definitely want to find more about it. So, yeah, there's always next week, right? We will bring.
If I have it.
We will be bringing you more NWA Spotlight shows in the future. There's a new weekly show that I've been looking forward to since we talked about it, 2 months ago, roughly. So it's something I'm just very happy to be doing because I love the NWA. I want everybody to go check us out. Check out the PWZ page on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter for updates, obviously, for updates and posts and all that fun stuff regarding this. Obviously, we're going to be talking. I want to bring up some next week Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling involving Micky Byggs. We didn't quite have the time to get into that tonight, but we will definitely next week. And yeah, check out everything there, and we will just keep updating you constantly.
Since you brought up PAPW, I had sent that promo over to Rich Arpin. Take a look at it. Next thing I know, he's sending me a message back. He's like, dude, you don't realize what you got here, do you? I said, what are you talking about? He goes, you need a tag team with the name of Smear. I said, Smear? He goes, yeah. I said, okay. He goes, and you need them to come out and act kind of feminine. I said, okay. He goes, your initials are PAP, Pap Smear.
I had a feeling you were going somewhere like that.
I was like, oh my God. I said, no, you did not.
I look forward to talking to him soon. I looked him up today and found some stuff on him. So as far as NWA history and him,
somehow I don't think that would go over well though.
No, I don't think so.
Not in today's world.
No, definitely not. That's a whole nother subject to get into in today's world.
Yeah, just like the Chuck and Billy, that wouldn't go over well today.
Not at all. Not at all. I can't even believe they had the nerve to do that. But
I don't know. That's wow. Pap Smear. I was like, really? That's just too funny. So, but yeah, everybody, this, like Rich said, this is the inaugural episode.
NWA's. Yep.
We do have a lot more to come, and it's NWA is a passion of both of ours. And like I said, I know that he only wanted me on to boost his ratings up, but that's okay. I can live with that. You know, I'm good with that. It's what I'm good for. That's why I am the BMB, the benefactor, Mickey Byggs. So, because I do what I do. And I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in for the inaugural episode. And of course, stay tuned for more because we do have a whole lot more going on. And it is NWA all the time, past, present, and future. NWA Spotlight. That's all I got.